Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We have an exceptionally dense stack of sources today. We're going on a rapid tour that spans foundational social policy in India, some ancient history, and even the surprising energy cost of our obsession with AI.
That's right. And our mission for this deep dive is to try and synthesize all of it. We're starting immediately with the editorial focus, looking at some really profound changes to India's welfare and labor rights framework.
And from there?
From there, we'll jump to a fascinating science discovery, then into macroeconomic theory and maritime security, and we'll wrap up with a look at some high-stakes global business battles and, as you said, the energy paradox of the AI boom.
Okay, let's dive right in. The first article details a seismic shift in social policy. We're talking about the overhaul of the MGNREGA.
The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, it's been a cornerstone for years.
And it's being replaced by the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission, Gramin, or VBG Ramji Act 2025.
And this is so much more than just a name change or a legislative update. It's really a philosophical reversal.
How so?
Well, since 2005, MGNREGA was built on a very specific principle. It was a legally enforceable, demand-driven right.
Meaning, if you demanded work, the state had to provide it.
Exactly. The state was obligated. This new 2025 legislation, it completely inverts that model. It moves to a supply-driven framework.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means the center gets sweeping authority to decide allocations, the scope of the work, and essentially to decide when and where the program even runs.
The ideological signal there seems pretty clear. The article points to the symbolic removal of Mahatma Gandhi's name from the title.
And that's huge. Analysts, including one of the original architects, Chandres, they call it an unmistakable political and ideological turn. It basically severs the law's moral claim.
It hollows out the original intent.
Precisely. You're moving away from the state having an obligation to secure a livelihood as a matter of right.
And you're moving towards what?
Towards a system that's based more on, let's say, discretionary state benevolence, executive largesse. And this shift is really cemented when you look at the fiscal changes.
Right. Let's get into that because it has immediate tangible consequences. Under MGNREGA, the funding ratio was 90.10. The center paid for most of it.
A huge majority. And now, that ratio has shifted dramatically to 60.40.
So you're immediately placing a much heavier financial burden on the states.
A much, much heavier one. And for the poorer states, the ones where demand for this kind of work is the highest, it creates an impossible choice.
They just can't afford their 40% share.
They'll be forced to curtail project approvals to essentially suppress the demand for work because they just can't meet that contribution. It's almost a perfect mechanism for shrinking the program where it's needed most.
The article also contrasts how these two laws were passed. MGNREGA had near unanimous support in Parliament. A moment of consensus.
It did, but VBG Ramji was rushed through, there were opposition walkouts, and it wasn't referred to a standing committee.
That divergence alone really highlights the political rupture.
It's a critical pattern. We're seeing the replacement of these institutional entitlements, claims that citizens hold against the state, with systems that concentrate authority and turn welfare into more of a policy tool.
And that theme of centralized authority, it seems to continue in our next article, which looks at India's new labor codes.
It absolutely does. The first major concern here is the process. 4 huge codes covering everything from wages to health and safety were passed without the traditional tripartite consultation.
So that's the meeting between workers, employers, and the government.
Right. That final consultation at the Indian Labor Conference, it just didn't happen.
And that's a big deal, considering the sheer number of people we're talking about.
A huge deal. The unorganized sector, that's over 90% of India's labor pool. So while the government claims these codes universalize Social Security, the analysis shows that unorganized workers have been, largely left out of many of the key protections in the other codes.
And in the effort to consolidate all this legislation, specific safety rules have actually been lost.
That's a really dangerous part of this. For construction workers, for instance, the old BOCW Act had about 180 specific safety rules. Many of those are just gone from the new OSHWC code.
It's a trade-off between simplifying the rules and actual worker safety on the ground.
A very dangerous trade-off.
Yeah.
It points to a wider neglect of occupational health. I mean, the codes largely ignore prevalent diseases that informal workers face, things like silicosis in construction or cancers from pesticides in agriculture.
Which violates international standards.
It runs contrary to ILO Convention 161, yes.
Yeah.
And the threat also extends to the state-level welfare infrastructure.
You mean the cesses, the funds from industries like beedi and salt mining that were earmarked for welfare.
Exactly. Those cesses are abolished, so the funding is no longer guaranteed. In practice, the new Social Security Code threatens the very existence of state-level welfare boards. Tamil Nadu has 39 of them.
And they provide pensions, housing aid.
Vital local protections. So what we're seeing isn't just a change in law, but potentially the dismantling of these decentralized, locally funded safety nets for millions of people.
Okay, let's shift gears now from the complexities of modern policy to an ancient mystery. Article 3 takes us to the science section and the archaeological puzzle at the Keezhadi settlement in Tamil Nadu.
Right, along the Vaigai River, archaeologists found these sophisticated structures, brick walls, drains, pottery, but they were buried deep under layers of sediment.
So the goal wasn't just to date the structures, but to date the burial itself, the event that covered them up.
Precisely. And to do that, they used a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL dating.
Tell us how that works. It sounds complicated.
The principle is actually quite elegant. The quartz grains in the sediment, they act like tiny natural clocks. They're constantly absorbing and storing energy from natural radiation in the environment around them.
Okay, so they're always accumulating this energy. How do you reset the clock?
Sunlight, that's the reset button. When the grains are exposed to sunlight, all that stored energy is released. The clock is zeroed out.
So when a flood happens and buries those grains under new dark layers of mud,
The clock starts ticking again, they're in the dark, and they start accumulating energy once more. So by taking a sample, stimulating the grains in a lab, and measuring the glow they give off, scientists can figure out how long it's been since those grains last saw the sun.
which tells you exactly when the burial event happened. That's incredible.
It is. It gives you an independent timeline for the disaster, separating the period of human occupation from the natural catastrophe.
So what did the OSL dating show for Keezhadi?
The analysis of samples from 2 different pits showed that the burial of these urban-like structures likely happened around 11,155 years before the present. The deepest structures themselves were about 1,170 years old.
So the settlement was active for a relatively short time before it was buried.
It seems so, and the mechanism was very clear from the sediment.
A flood.
A high-energy flood event, yes. First, a layer of coarse sand, then finer silts and clays that sealed everything. The big implication here is that the dating separates the time people lived here from the time nature buried what they left behind.
It's direct evidence of how major river floods have reshaped human history in the region.
Absolutely. It suggests this entire site may have been abandoned or relocated because of a massive flood about a millennium ago.
Fascinating. Let's move now to text and context. Article 4 tackles a long-standing macroeconomic puzzle: why India's manufacturing sector has, for so long, underperformed.
Right. Its share of GDP has stagnated or even declined, especially when you compare it to other non-Western success stories like China or South Korea.
And to explain this, economist Arvind Subramanian uses the idea of the Dutch disease.
Yes, though he applies it in a really interesting way. The original theory, is about a natural resource windfall. You find oil, your currency gets strong, and suddenly your manufactured goods are too expensive to export.
But India didn't have a sudden oil boom. So what was the windfall here?
Subramanian's argument is that the windfall was high government salaries, especially after major pay commission hikes.
So public policy created the effect.
Exactly. By setting a high benchmark in the public sector, it raised economy-wide wages and domestic prices. This led to a real exchange rate appreciation, which made domestic manufacturing less competitive and opened the floodgates for cheaper imports.
That's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
But it raises a big question. If wages were getting too high, why didn't the private sector react by investing in technology to boost productivity?
That is the core question. It brings us to the counter theory of induced innovation, the idea that high wages should force companies to innovate. It's what supposedly drove the British Industrial Revolution.
So what went wrong in India?
The article suggests the failure was that the private sector just didn't make that painful but necessary investment in technological growth to justify the higher wages.
And we can see the legacy of that today. Even in the fast-growing software sector, entry-level salaries haven't shown much real growth since the 2000s.
That's right. And many of the modern tech unicorns seem built to leverage India's huge labor reserves, rather than pioneering genuine productivity improvements that decouple growth from just adding more people.
So it leaves you with this fundamental question. Was it government policy that distorted the market? Or did manufacturing just get addicted to cheap labor and avoid the hard work of innovation?
That's the debate at the heart of it.
From the factory floor, let's head to the coast. Article 5 looks at India's maritime surge and the new security measures that come with it.
The growth numbers are pretty staggering. A 57% expansion in port capacity, soaring cargo growth, and ship turnaround time has been cut in half since 2014.
And all that growth necessitates a modern security framework.
Right, which is where the new Bureau of Port Security, or BOPS, comes in. It's a statutory body modeled on the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security.
So it's about creating a single, standardized oversight body for the marine sector.
That's the main goal. Its role is coordination, addressing the challenges of having so many different agencies. The Coast Guard, CISF, the Navy all operating in the same space.
And what are the specific threats it's designed to handle?
It covers the traditional ones. Maritime terrorism, illicit trafficking of drugs and arms, piracy. But, crucially, there's also a dedicated division for the cybersecurity of port IT infrastructure.
Which is essential in today's world.
Absolutely. It's about ensuring compliance with the international ISPS code across the board.
It sounds like a necessary modernization. But similar to the other codes we discussed, there's criticism about centralization.
That's the friction point. The new Indian Ports Act gives the union government significantly more authority over non-major ports, many of which are state-owned.
And the coastal states are pushing back.
They are. They're raising concerns about a silent cost to maritime federalism, arguing that central authority is expanding at the expense of their autonomy over local maritime assets.
All right, let's shift to the business section. Article 6 gets into a high-stakes battle for India's emerging obesity drug market. And the numbers here are just massive.
They really are. India is projected to have the world's second largest overweight and obese population by 2050. A market that's worth about $70 million now is expected to clear $1 billion in just 2 years.
Which has the big pharmaceutical giants scrambling.
An aggressive scramble between Eli Lilly with its drug Mounjaro and Novo Nordisk with Wegovy and Ozempic. And their strategy is all about doctor outreach, heavy advertising, and distribution deals.
Especially in a market where most patients pay out of pocket.
Exactly. Lilly even used Bollywood actors in social media campaigns to try and build that brand recognition early on.
And they got a crucial first strike advantage, right? Mounjaro launched in March and quickly started leading in sales value.
It did, partly because of its claim of achieving greater weight loss. But the price is a huge barrier. It starts around 13,125 rupees for the lowest monthly dose.
So how did Novo Nordisk respond to that?
Their counter-strategy was all about price and accessibility. They cut Wegovy's price by up to 37% and launched the blockbuster Ozempic at an even lower starting price, around 8,800 rupees a month.
So the battle is really about who can capture the most patients before the generics arrive.
And that generic cliff is looming, especially for Novo Nordisk.
When does that happen?
The patent on semaglutide, the active ingredient in Wegovy and Ozempic, expires in March 2026. And there are more than 20 Indian drug makers ready to launch generics that could cost 60% less.
That will completely change the market.
Fundamentally. But this is where Lilly has a major strategic advantage.
Their patent lasts longer.
Much longer. The patent on tirzepatide, Mounjaro's ingredient, is protected until the middle of the next decade. That gives them a much longer runway of market exclusivity, insulating them from the generic price war that Novo is about to face.
Our final article today connects the absolute cutting edge of technology AI with some of the oldest and dirtiest parts of our energy grid.
It's a really striking paradox. We're seeing old fossil-fueled peaker power plants being pulled out of retirement.
And this is happening because of AI.
It's a primary driver. The massive, just insatiable new demand for electricity from AI data centers is giving these old plants a new lease on life.
The article uses the example of the Fisk plant in Chicago, a 60s-era oil-fired plant.
Right, in the working-class Pilsen neighborhood. NRG was going to retire it, but then high prices on the PJM grid made it profitable to run again.
And the environmental and social costs of that are huge.
Immense. These plants are less efficient, they emit way more localized pollution, and they often lack modern controls like mercury scrubbers. They were built for short bursts of power, not to be run constantly.
And there's a serious environmental justice angle to this.
A very serious one. These peaker plants, about 1,000 of them across the country, are disproportionately located in low-income communities and communities of color.
So when you extend their life, those communities are the ones who bear the brunt of the pollution.
That's exactly it. Vulnerable communities are enduring more pollution to power a high-tech industry somewhere else.
And the grid operators just say their hands are tied. They need the power.
They argue they need every single megawatt to keep up with demand. The PJM grid, which is the nation's largest, has delayed or canceled the retirement of 13 plants just since January, and 11 of those were peakers.
It's a painful paradox.
It is. These peakers become the shock absorber for the whole system. And while long-term alternatives exist, better transmission lines, large-scale battery storage, the immediate need to power AI forces us to rely on this dirty infrastructure. It's entrenching environmental hazards.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today, from the legal dismantling of social rights to the puzzle of creating jobs without tech advancement, and now this unintended consequence of AI actually driving a fossil fuel resurgence.
And if you connect all these threads, the centralization of power, the market imperatives driving energy demand, and pharmaceutical profits, you're left with this fundamental tension. A tension between rapid, market-driven changes and the slow, difficult process of securing long-term rights, whether that's a guaranteed livelihood or environmental justice.
A real clash.
It is. And it leaves us with a question for you, for all of us to consider. When these market imperatives clash with democratic or environmental safeguards, how do we make sure that necessary economic growth doesn't permanently institutionalize injustice or roll back entitlements that took decades to win?
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.